at 4:47 that morning, in Manhattan, and Lucas Evans was already seated on his throne of glass and steel. The 80th floor office of Evans Technologies was a sanctuary of material triumphs, walls wrapped in 200-year-old French oak, floors paved in Carrara marble, furniture signed by architects whose names rang like bells in European galleries. At 42, Lucas embodied the American dream, an orphan from Brooklyn who, through raw tech brilliance and relentless grit, had built a $10 billion empire. But on that particularly cold October dawn, while the city slept under a veil of fog and unkept promises, the man who had everything felt he held absolutely nothing that mattered. His fingers, hands that had signed deals moving national economies, glided across the polished surface of his executive desk, a slab of Brazilian mahogany that had cost more than the two-story house where he'd grown up, his mother working 3 jobs to keep him in school. Silver-framed photos told a carefully curated story of success. Lucas shaking hands with a former president in the Oval Office, Lucas receiving Innovator of the Year at the World Economic Forum, Lucas smiling on the cover of Forbes under the headline "The Genius Who Revolutionized Quantum Computing." But the eyes in those photos belonged to a stranger, someone who still believed, with a convert's naive faith, that wealth could buy happiness, that professional triumph could fill the existential void. The gold iPhone on his desk, a custom gift from his engineers marking the triumphant launch of their latest product, vibrated softly, its bespoke chime echoing in the oppressive silence. The screen lit with a photo of Emma, 8 years old, captured in a gap-toothed smile missing from his life for exactly 8 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. He'd been counting since Sarah, his wife of 12 years, had loaded suitcases into the car under a February downpour. "Daddy, Mommy said you're too busy again. When are you coming to pick me up for our week together?" The message, with its sweet typo that made him smile through tears, pierced his impenetrable CEO armor deeper than any business crisis, more painfully than any stock dip. The divorce had turned his 3-story Fifth Avenue palace, with its indoor pool, private theater, and modern art collection, into a cell of solitude, every empty room echoing with laughter that once filled it, every quiet hallway reminding him of conversations that would never happen again. As Lucas stared into the abyss of his achievements, down in the service corridors of the same building that housed his realized dreams, Maria Rodriguez began her shift with the ritual precision of someone who knows every inch of the dark. At 38, her Navy company uniform had become a second skin, its creases and stains telling the story of countless nights of solitary work. Her movements were economical, exact. Years of night shifts had taught the efficiency of survival, the art of doing much with little, the quiet wisdom of understanding that dignity isn't in what you do, but in how you do it. She prepared her cart meticulously, lining up bottles by order of use, checking brushes for wear, counting microfiber cloths, her hands, marked by hard labor and the constant cold of windowless corridors, trembling slightly. Not from weakness, but from the tension of carrying a secret too heavy for her shoulders. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the chemical scent of cleaning products she had learned to associate with safety, with routine, with the certainty that at least this part of her life was predictable. She opened the inner pocket of her jacket, fingers finding the worn plastic that protected her only reason to keep going. The photograph, faded from being handled, kissed, cried over. Miguel, frozen at 10 and a smile that cruelly defied the medical diagnosis hanging over their heads like a sword. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. 2 words that had turned her life into a countdown against the most ruthless clock, a frenzied dance between hope and despair. 2 years of chemo, nights under fluorescent hospital lights that made everything unreal, medical bills piling like snow in a winter storm. Each new invoice a reminder the system was broken, that her son's life had a price she could never pay alone. Every scrubbed floor, every pane of glass polished to a shine, every restroom sanitized with a surgeon's precision meant one more treatment session, one more day of hope for Miguel, one more night she could go home and tell him, yes, Mommy did it, Mommy always does. Work wasn't just work, it was her prayer, her sacrifice, her offering to the capricious gods of health and fate. Maria's radio chirped softly, its green light blinking in the darkness of the service corridor. Rodriguez, we need you in the main lobby immediately. Something's wrong with the security system and there's chaos everywhere. The supervisor's voice was unusually tense. Her breath caught, heart quickening. The main lobby was the domain of managers and executives, of important people with expensive suits and conversations about mergers and acquisitions. Not a place for a cleaner. Not her turf. Not where she belonged. As Maria grabbed her gear with hands that now truly trembled and began climbing the service stairs, avoiding the elevators that were for them, not for her, Lucas got an urgent call from his COO. The tone alarmed him most. David never lost composure. Lucas, we've got a critical level 5 problem in the core system. The automatic backup failed during the night update and the primary is corrupted. We're completely offline. Servers, databases, internal comms, everything. His voice was visibly shaking now. The meeting with the Chinese investors starts in exactly 2 hours. They're flying in from Shanghai for this demo. If we don't fix it before they arrive. Lucas didn't need David to finish. He knew what was at stake. Not just the $50 million investment, but his reputation, the company's credibility, everything he'd built with his own hands over 15 years of obsessive work. In a blink, his private world of pain and loneliness vanished, replaced by the cold urgency of corporate disaster. 2 worlds separated by 80 floors of social distance, by millions of dollars of income gap, by entire universes of experience and expectation. 2 hearts broken by different pains, one by the loss of a family he'd built and then neglected in the name of success, the other by the desperate fight to keep the only family she had. 2 human beings moving through darkness before dawn, each carrying private demons, unaware that the universe, in its cruel, beautiful sense of humor, was about to braid their fates in a way that would forever redefine their sense of worth, of compassion, of what it truly means to live a life that matters, of the invisible threads binding us far beyond the artificial divides we create. At 5:15 that morning, the Evans Technologies main lobby usually breathed quiet elegance, a cavern of white marble and brushed steel where the only sound was the faint echo of your own steps. But that morning, chaos had taken the throne. Emergency lights flashed in erratic patterns, security monitors showed blue screens of death, and a dozen engineers, some in pajamas under hastily thrown coats, rushed between consoles, trading technical jargon that might as well be a foreign tongue to anyone else. Lucas stepped out of the executive elevator feeling the weight of every eye. His $1,000 shoes cracked on marble as he moved to the eye of the storm, his CEO posture instinctively shifting into crisis commander. Status report, he ordered, his voice slicing through the anxious air. David, his COO, hurried over, face pale under the artificial light. It's worse than we thought. It isn't just a system failure, it looks intentional. Someone injected malicious code during the night update. We're trying rollbacks, but each attempt makes it worse. While engineers debated firewalls and patches, Maria watched from the lobby's edges with eyes trained not on code, but on people. Her blue uniform looked like a blot of normalcy amid technological pandemonium. She didn't see corrupted lines. She saw behavior. The night guard who always slipped away for 20 minutes at 3:47. The intern who stayed late studying yet glanced nervously at cameras. The maintenance tech who insisted on working alone in the server rooms despite company policy requiring supervision. Her attention snagged on a detail no one else noticed, a small green light blinking on a control panel behind the reception desk. It wasn't part of the main system but a secondary device she cleaned every night. While the engineers spun theories, Maria drifted toward the panel, her fingers, accustomed to wiping every millimeter of that space, finding a tiny USB device hidden behind it, almost invisible unless you knew every inch as she did. "Sir," she said softly to the nearest engineer. "I think I found something." The young engineer, no older than 25, thick glasses and an air of superiority, looked down at her. "We don't have time for that now, ma'am. Please return to your activities." At that exact moment, Maria's phone rang, not the default tone, but the melody she reserved for the hospital. Her hands shook as she answered, her voice shifting instantly from timid to maternal. "Miguel, mi amor, are you okay?" "No, Mommy's fine, just working." "Yes, I promise I'll come as soon as I'm done." "You're my warrior, remember? Warriors don't give up." From a distance, Lucas had been watching the frustrated exchange. Something unexpected moved inside him. Maria's voice, soft, steady, overflowing with a love so pure it almost hurt to hear, clashed brutally with the clinical cold around him. In her eyes he saw not the submission of an employee, but the ferocity of a mother fighting for her child. And suddenly, the tens of millions at risk felt smaller. He stepped in, ignoring the engineer gearing up to pitch another complex theory. "What did you find?" Lucas asked, his voice gentler than he intended. Maria showed the tiny USB, her hands still trembling. "It was hidden behind the panel, sir. I clean here every night, and it wasn't here yesterday. And I'm sorry, but I noticed Mr. Johnson, the night tech, vanishes for exactly 20 minutes every dawn. He says he goes to smoke, but he doesn't. I clean the smoking area." "I'd know." The engineers traded skeptical looks. But Lucas, the same man who'd built an empire by trusting instinct when data failed, felt the tug. "David, check it," he ordered, pointing to the device. While the techs examined the USB, Lucas glanced at Maria. She was staring at her son's photo on her phone, lips moving in silent prayer. And in her eyes he saw no fear of losing her job, no anxiety over corporate fallout. He saw the primal terror of a mother who might lose her child, a terror that dwarfed his own problems. The USB held not only the malicious code but logs pointing to the night technician as the saboteur, a man blackmailed by a rival company over gambling debts. The crisis was contained with minutes to spare before the investors arrived. As the engineers cheered and David prepared the damage report, Lucas stood in the middle of the lobby, watching Maria slip back into her tasks. She didn't ask for recognition, didn't expect gratitude. She simply kept doing what she'd always done, cleaning, fixing, keeping things in order at her level. And Lucas Evans, the billionaire who thought he'd seen everything, realized he might never have truly seen anything. The silence after the crisis said more than the chaos before it. As engineers drifted off, relieved, and David began security procedures to handle the saboteur, Lucas remained motionless at the lobby's center, eyes fixed on the solitary figure of Maria Rodriguez. She had slipped on her rubber gloves and returned to her tasks with a naturalness verging on surreal, as if she'd merely paused a routine to help avert a $50 million disaster. Her movements were methodical, almost meditative. She polished the marble with a concentration that turned the ordinary act of cleaning into something that felt sacred. Lucas watched her kneel to scrub a nearly invisible blemish near a column's base, a mark he, who'd walked past for years, had never seen. There was a dignity in her work he'd never associated with that role. A dignity he realized, with a tightening in his chest, had long been missing from his own. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Emma. "Daddy, I forgot. I won an award at school today. The teacher said my drawing was the best." A blurry photo followed, of a figure he recognized as himself, holding the hand of a tiny girl under a sun with long, spiky rays. Something cracked inside him, a barrier he didn't know existed. He approached Maria, footsteps echoing on the freshly shined marble. She looked up, cautious surprise in her brown eyes. "Sir," she said, her soft voice carrying an unspoken question. "How did you know?" Lucas asked, ignoring corporate protocol that usually governed his interactions with entry-level staff. "About the technician, the device. How did you catch what a dozen of my best engineers missed?" Maria hesitated, fingers worrying the edge of her glove. "I watch people, sir. It's what we do, those of us who clean where people work. We see patterns. Mr. Johnson always checks his watch at 3:47, always goes to the same restroom, always stays for exactly 20 minutes. And he always glances at the cameras first, like he's making sure no one's paying attention." She paused, looking at her gloved hands. "And the device? I clean that panel every night. I know every screw, every wire. When something changes, I notice. It's my job to notice." A wave of shame hit Lucas so hard he almost stepped back. This woman, whom he paid less in a year than he spent on a single business dinner, possessed an attention to detail, a dedication to her work, that he hadn't seen in his executives for years. She wasn't just cleaning a building, she was tending it. Knowing it. Loving it, in a way he, the owner, never had. "Your son," the question slipped out before he could stop it. "You mentioned he's in the hospital." Maria's expression shifted instantly, a mixture of pain, pride, and resilience almost painful to witness. "Miguel. He has leukemia. 2 years now." She said nothing more, but Lucas read the rest in her eyes, the sleepless nights, the constant fear, the endless bills, the stubborn hope refusing to die. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words sounded pathetically small. What did he, with his billions, know about fighting for a child's life? About choosing rent or treatment? About cleaning executive restrooms while your son battled for his? Maria only nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears. "He's strong. Stronger than me, sometimes." She glanced at the wall clock, one simple gesture that spoke volumes about the responsibilities waiting when her shift ended. Lucas felt an urgent need to do something, to fix, to help, to balance the universe's screaming unfairness. But every solution that came to mind felt wrong. Offer money? It would reduce her struggle to a transaction. Promote her? It would pull her from the work she clearly mastered and, in her quiet way, cherished. As he wrestled with the dilemma, David approached. "Investors arrive in 40 minutes. We need to prep the boardroom. And the police are on their way for Johnson." Lucas nodded automatically, his mind still caught in conversation with Maria. He looked at her again, calloused hands, tired yet determined eyes, a humble but unshakable posture. And suddenly, he understood. The problem wasn't that Maria needed his help. The problem was that he needed hers. He needed to remember what it meant to see people not as resources or obstacles, but as human beings with stories, struggles, dignity. He needed to remember what it meant to care for something, really care, rather than simply own it. "Maria," he said, his voice softer than it had ever sounded in that building. "Thank you for everything." She looked surprised, then nodded once and returned to her work. But as Lucas rode the elevator back to his office, he felt something fundamental shift inside him. The tech crisis was resolved. A deeper crisis, a crisis of soul, had only just begun. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Lucas Evans had no idea how to fix it. The meeting with the Chinese investors flowed with an almost supernatural ease. Lucas, usually a master of corporate performance, found himself operating in a strange, uncomfortable clarity. His answers were more precise, his explanations more honest, his presence more human. The investors, initially wary after whispers about the morning's meltdown, left not just convinced but genuinely impressed. The $50 million contract was signed with warm handshakes and promises of a long partnership. But while David and the team celebrated with champagne on the executive floor, Lucas felt like a stranger to his own success. Every congratulatory smile, every clap on the back, every toast to the genius who always delivers sounded hollow. His mind wasn't on the fresh millions or the global expansion they'd fund. It was in the basement, in the calloused hands of a woman cleaning his restrooms while her son fought for his life. He dismissed the team earlier than usual, citing fatigue, a convenient excuse no one questioned after the morning's stress. Instead of returning to his empty Fifth Avenue apartment, he lingered in his office, watching the city light up against dusk. The lights that once represented conquest now felt like silent witnesses to his disconnection. Meanwhile, during the afternoon shift, Maria finished her tasks with her customary efficiency. Her movements were automatic, body knowing each motion before mind needed to command it. But today, there was a difference, a subtle lightness in her step she hadn't felt that morning. Her brief exchange with Lucas had planted a seed of hope she'd long been afraid to allow. She was cleaning the executive break room when she found a wallet forgotten on a chair. Fine leather, no obvious identifiers, but heavy in a way that suggested importance. She opened it carefully, not to snoop, but to find an ID. Black credit cards, a pilot's license, several elite club cards, then what she needed, a corporate ID with the photo of Lucas Evans. Her heart quickened. She knew the protocol: turn it in at reception, fill out a lost and found form, follow the process. Yet something made her hesitate. She remembered his eyes that morning, not the commanding gaze from magazine covers, but the eyes of a man, lost, confused, human. While Maria weighed her decision, Lucas received a call most CEOs would celebrate. His divorce attorney reported that Sarah had accepted his final offer, a sum that would guarantee a life of luxury for her and Emma, but essentially bought his permanent exit from their lives. It was what he wanted, what he'd fought months to secure. So why did victory taste like defeat? He hung up and walked to the window again. Down below, he saw Maria leaving through the service entrance, a solitary figure contrasted with executives streaming out in chattering groups. She paused, looking up, not at his specific floor, but at the building as a whole, then turned and disappeared into the night crowd. That's when Lucas realized he'd left his wallet in the break room. Normally, a minor inconvenience, assistants would cancel cards and arrange replacements. But in that moment, the loss felt significant, as if the universe were testing him. He went down expecting to find it at the front desk. It wasn't. The night security guard confirmed no one had turned it in. A stab of disappointment, irrational yet fierce, cut him. He had allowed himself to believe, even for a moment, that maybe. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Evans? Maria's hesitant voice. I found your wallet. I'm at the hospital with Miguel, but I can leave it with security early tomorrow if you can wait. The simplicity of the offer, the lack of expectation, the clear priority of her child over his convenience, something in Lucas gave way. Which hospital? He asked before he could think. A pause. Memorial, sir. But really, don't worry. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said, and hung up before she could protest. In the taxi to the hospital, the city streaked by in a wash of lights and shadows. He didn't know what he expected to accomplish. Didn't know what he'd say, what he'd do. Only that, for the first time in years, he was following an impulse with nothing to do with profit, strategy, or competitive edge. Something older, more fundamental. As the cab neared the hospital, Lucas Evans prepared not to fix someone else's world, but to face the far greater resistance within himself. The Memorial Hospital rose against the night like a cathedral of hope and despair. Fluorescent lights bathed the entrance in a glare that made everything both clear and surreal. Lucas paid the driver without looking, eyes locked on the automatic doors opening and closing like the valves of a giant heart. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. People sat in plastic chairs with faces ranging from quiet resignation to contained panic. Nurses moved with the tired efficiency of those who know every inch of human suffering. Lucas felt like an alien landing on a planet whose rules he never learned. He texted Maria, "I'm at reception." The reply came quickly, "3rd floor, Pediatric Oncology, room 312. Every step in the elevator carried the weight of years of wrong choices. The doors opened on a corridor painted in bright colors, sky blues, hopeful greens, sunny yellows, brave attempts, if a little desperate, to cheer a place where children fought battles adults would dread. Room 312's door was ajar. Lucas paused, looking through the gap. Maria sat at the edge of a bed, her figure bent over a small child whose bald head shone under a soft lamp. She was singing quietly, a Spanish lullaby he didn't recognize, but whose melody promised unconditional love, eternal vows, courage in the darkest places. He tapped lightly. Maria looked up, surprise plain on her face. "Mr. Evans, you really came." Miguel, because who else could it be, turned his head on the pillow. Large, dark eyes and a pale face studied Lucas with curiosity that transcended illness. "Are you the man from the tall building?" he asked, voice stronger than Lucas expected. "Yes," Lucas said, stepping inside. "I work there." My mom cleans your office, Miguel offered, as if stating an interesting fact, not a divide. She says you've got a beautiful view, but it looks lonely. The innocent observation hit Lucas like a punch. He glanced at Maria, who flushed. Miguel, Carino, that's private. But it's true, Mom, the boy insisted. You said the man in the window always looks like he's waiting for someone who never comes. Lucas sat in the room's only other chair, legs suddenly weak. He's right, he said to Maria. It's true. The next minutes unfolded into a conversation none of them expected. Miguel, with the strange acuity of children who face mortality, asked questions adults avoid for decades. Why do you work so much if you already have enough money? Are you scared of being alone forever? My mom says love is the only thing that really matters. Do you agree? Each question was a mirror held to reflections Lucas didn't want to see. And each of Maria's answers, gentle, wise, forged in the furnace of real suffering, revealed depths he'd never imagined beneath a cleaner's uniform. You know, Maria said when Miguel drifted to sleep, I used to be afraid of people like you. People with power. I thought money made you less human somehow. She paused, stroking her son's smooth head. But today, seeing you here, I realize I was wrong. Pain is the same. Fear is the same. The need for connection, the same. Only the settings change. A nurse came in to check Miguel's vitals. Spotting Lucas, she did a double take. Mr. Evans? The CEO of Evans Tech? My husband works for your company. He nodded, feeling the familiar weight of recognition. The nurse turned to Maria. Ms. Rodriguez, we've got the latest results. Dr. Gupta would like to speak with you tomorrow morning. Maria's face became a mask of controlled terror. Lucas recognized the expression, one he'd seen on executives before mass layoffs, only multiplied until corporate worries felt laughable. Can I help in any way? He asked, knowing even as he spoke that no sum could buy the answer she needed most. Maria looked at him, eyes wet. You're already helping, she whispered. By being here. By seeing us. By remembering we exist. In that quiet hospital room, with a sick child's soft breathing filling the spaces between their words, Lucas Evans understood something elemental. He'd spent a life building empires, conquering markets, amassing wealth, to prove the poor kid from Brooklyn had become someone. Yet never, in all those thunderous years of success, had he felt so truly seen, so fully human, as in that hospital room with a cleaner and her ailing son. Revelation didn't arrive with a bang. It came quietly, as truth does when we're finally ready. And Lucas knew, with a certainty beyond logic, that nothing in his life would ever be the same. Dawn found Lucas in his office before sunrise, but not for work. He sat before his empty desk, gazing over the waking city, seeing something entirely different: the hospital room, Miguel's bald head on a white pillow, Maria's eyes brimming with courage that defied reason. When David entered at 7, expecting Lucas buried in post-investment reports, he was surprised to find him simply staring out the window. Lucas? You okay? Lucas turned slowly. Cancel my morning. And call Sarah, tell her I'm withdrawing my settlement offer. I want to negotiate shared custody of Emma. David froze. Are you sure? We've spent months. I'm sure, Lucas said, calm but final. And another thing, review our health benefits, specifically coverage for severe illnesses and dependents. As David processed, Lucas's phone rang. Maria. Her voice sounded different, lighter, threaded with new hope. Mr. Evans, the results. The tumor, it's shrinking. Dr. Gupta says it's almost miraculous. A wave of relief so strong he had to grip the desk washed over him. Maria, that's wonderful. There's more, she added, voice trembling. Miguel, he asked for you this morning. Said he dreamed you were teaching him chess. The simple statement struck him in a way no corporate praise ever had. A child who barely knew him was thinking about him, dreaming of him. While his own daughter. Tell Miguel I'd love to teach him, Lucas said, realizing he meant every word. He looked at David, still standing in the doorway, dazed. David, do you have kids? Yes, 2. Why? When was the last time you really listened to them? Not their words, what was underneath? Silence stretched as confusion shifted into dawning understanding. Lucas, what happened to you last night? Lucas smiled, genuinely, not the calculated CEO smile. I think I finally understood what my father tried to tell me before he died. He said real wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you share. I thought I understood. Only now I really do. At the hospital, Maria held Miguel's hand, still trembling from the call. The doctor used words like unexpected remission and exceptional response, but Maria knew there was more at play. Something about Lucas's visit, about how Miguel had woken with a spark she hadn't seen in months. Will he come back, Mom? Miguel asked, fingers brushing the blanket's edge. Who, honey? The man from the tall building. The one who looks lonely. She smoothed his forehead. I think so, Miguel. I think he will. Back at the office, Lucas made calls that stunned his executive team. He canceled a multi-million-dollar acquisition that would have cut hundreds of jobs, not strategic long-term, revised remote work policies to be more flexible for parents, families come first, and ordered legal to review all vendor contracts to ensure living wages. Lucas, the CFO, protested, some of these changes will hit quarterly profits hard. Lucas looked at the man who'd spent a decade seeing only numbers. James, how much is enough? When do we stop counting and start living? The question hung in the boardroom. No one had an answer. But the deepest change came when Lucas called Sarah. Instead of the guarded, transactional tone of recent months, his voice was soft, vulnerable. Sarah, I was wrong. Very wrong. Emma needs her mother. And I need to learn to be a better father. Can we start again? Not like before, better? On the line, a silence so deep he thought she'd hung up. Then a breath, followed by words he hadn't heard in years. I was wrong too, Lucas. Maybe we can try. When he ended the call, tears filled his eyes, for the first time since he was a boy in Brooklyn, promising his dying mother he'd become someone. He looked out the window again, but this time he didn't see a domain to rule. He saw a city full of Mariahs and Miguels, of Davids and Sarahs, of real people with real pain and real hope. And for the first time, he didn't feel separated by glass and steel. He felt part of them. Transformation didn't happen in a flash, nor did it magically fix everything. But it planted a seed of humanity that, with care, could grow into something more beautiful and meaningful than any commercial empire. And Lucas Evans, the former poor kid turned billionaire, finally understood his true wealth was only beginning to be revealed. In the weeks that followed, changes at Evans Technologies baffled analysts and made employees wary. Lucas didn't just implement family-friendly policies, he lived them. Meetings started at 9 sharp and ended at 5, no exceptions. Weekends were sacred, devoted to Emma. And every Tuesday afternoon, he disappeared for exactly 2 hours, time his assistants learned not to question. Those Tuesdays were spent at Memorial, room 312, where Lucas and Miguel shaped a peculiar ritual. While Maria watched from her corner chair, Lucas taught the boy chess, not with a master's impatience, but with a shared beginner's curiosity. Miguel, his mind sharpened by facing things far bigger than himself, proved exceptional. "You think too long before you move," Miguel observed during their third lesson, his weak fingers holding a wooden knight Lucas had brought. "My mom says when you think too much, sometimes you miss what your heart already knows." Lucas paused, hand hovering above the board. He looked at Maria, who smiled. "He's right," Lucas admitted. "I've spent my life thinking. Maybe it's time to start feeling." As the chess sessions continued, something curious happened. Lucas realized he was learning as much as he taught. Miguel taught patience, not the calculated patience of timing a market, but the deep patience of accepting that some things take the time they take. Maria taught dignity, not the performative dignity of success, but the quiet dignity of doing your work well, no matter how humble. These lessons seeped into his leadership. In a particularly tense board meeting on cost cuts, Lucas stunned everyone. "Instead of layoffs, let's ask people how to work smarter. The best solutions might come from those who actually do the work, not those who just supervise it." There was skepticism at first, but when frontline employees produced ideas that saved millions and improved efficiency, even the most cynical directors had to admit Lucas was onto something. Meanwhile, Miguel's health steadily improved in ways doctors called clinically significant. The boy who once could barely sit up now walked to the window in the hall, his hand in Lucas's, pointing at buildings rising into the sky. "One day I'll work in a tall building like yours," Miguel said one afternoon, eyes bright with the certainty only children have. Lucas crouched to meet him at eye level. "Miguel, you can work wherever you want. Just remember, it's not the building that matters. It's what you build inside it. And inside you." From the doorway, Maria felt something loosen inside, a knot of fear and distrust she'd carried so long she'd almost forgotten life without it. In Lucas, she didn't see a wealthy benefactor condescending to help the poor. She saw a man genuinely finding his way back to his own humanity. One afternoon in the hospital garden, Maria asked the question that had haunted her. "Why are you doing this, Lucas?" Truly, it's not pity. It's not guilt, so why? Lucas stopped, watching autumn leaves dance in a soft wind. "Because I was dying, Maria. Not physically, like Miguel. In a way that might be worse, I was dying inside. And you too reminded me how to live." He turned to her, eyes sincere. "I spent my life chasing success, thinking if I got enough money, power, admiration, I'd finally feel complete. But the more I amassed, the emptier I felt. Until that day in the lobby. Until I saw you not as a cleaner, but as a mother. Until I saw Miguel not as a sick child, but as a teacher. Maria was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. "So we saved you," she said at last, not a question, a realization. Lucas smiled, sad and beautiful at once. "Yes. And I hope, in some small way, I can return the favor." When he returned to his office that afternoon, he didn't immediately take his chair. He stood at the window, looking at the city not as territory to conquer, but as a community he belonged to. And for the first time he could remember, he felt not like a detached observer, but an engaged participant. His most important lesson hadn't come from business books or pricey consultants. It came from a cleaner and real child, that true success isn't measured in dollars or floors, but in the connections we make, the lives we touch, the love we share. And Lucas Evans finally understood that his most valuable education had only just begun. 6 months later, Evans Technologies held its annual shareholder meeting in a packed auditorium. Analysts expected the usual announcements about revenue growth and market expansion. Instead, Lucas stepped onto the stage and spoke about something that left many perplexed: the value of vulnerability. For years, he began, voice carrying a new authenticity. "I measured success by numbers, EPS, market share, net worth. And by those measures, I did well. But there are other measures, ones that don't appear in quarterly reports yet define the legacy we leave." He did something no $10 billion CEO had ever done. He told the story of Maria and Miguel. Not as a feel-good anecdote, but as a lesson in humility. He spoke of the day a cleaner saw what his brightest engineers could not. Of afternoon chess in a hospital room. Of learning that true intelligence isn't in computer code but in codes of character. As a result, Lucas continued, "I'm announcing the Evans Family Health Initiative. We'll cover 100% of treatment for severe illnesses and employees' dependents, regardless of position. And we're establishing a foundation to fund scholarships for children facing medical challenges." For a heartbeat the room was silent, then it erupted, not with polite shareholder applause, but something more genuine. More human. In a modest Queens apartment, Maria watched the live speech on TV, her hand holding Miguel's, now sprouting soft tufts of hair, eyes bright with renewed health. When Lucas mentioned their names, Miguel looked up. "He didn't forget us, Mom." Maria smiled through tears. "Some people you simply don't forget, honey." Later that week, Lucas visited again, not the hospital, but their home. He brought no extravagant gifts, but something more meaningful, a professional chess set and the promise to continue lessons. While Miguel pondered his next move, Maria poured tea in a small kitchen Lucas could have bought 100 times over with the cost of a single dinner. "You changed our life," she said softly. Lucas shook his head. "You changed mine. I'm just returning the favor." Then Miguel made his play, not the one Lucas expected, but one that showed a grasp of the game beyond his years. "Checkmate," the boy announced calmly. Lucas looked at the board, then at Miguel, and laughed, real laughter, full of wonder and joy. "You beat me. Fair and square." Miguel grinned, face lit by triumph. "You taught me sometimes you have to sacrifice the right piece to win the game." The words hung in the air, weighted with meaning far beyond chess. Lucas looked from Maria to Miguel and knew this would be his last regular visit. Not because he didn't love them or care, but because their healing, and his, was complete. They no longer needed him as a benefactor or teacher. And he no longer needed them as salvation. A few weeks later, Lucas picked up Emma for their custody weekend. Instead of expensive outings or lavish gifts, they went to the park. As he pushed her on a swing, listening to her laughter braid with other children's, Lucas felt a peace money had never bought. "Daddy," Emma said as she hopped off, "you seem different. Happier." He hugged her. "I'm learning, sweetheart." Slowly. Monday, he returned to work with a clarity long missing. Evan's technologies would continue to grow, innovate, succeed. But now there would be purpose behind profit, to build a place where people could be whole, where families were valued, where success was measured not just in dollars, but in dignity. That evening, as Lucas looked out his office window one last time that day, he didn't see an empire to rule. He saw a city full of stories waiting to be heard, connections waiting to be made, humanity waiting to be recognized. He picked up his phone and texted Maria, "Thank you for teaching me that true wealth isn't what we have, but what we share." Her reply came quickly, "Thank you for reminding us we all have something valuable to offer, no matter how humble it seems." And in that moment, Lucas understood that the greatest achievement of his life wouldn't be found in any balance sheet or headline. It lived in the simple, profound, transforming truth that sometimes, to find yourself, you must first lose yourself in service to others. And that the most enduring legacy any of us can leave is not what we build for ourselves, but what we help build in one another.